G'day, ZiggyD here, and welcome to the build guide for my Crit Chaos Ethereal Knives Witch. If you're sick and tired of brain-melting one-button win builds and want something that actually requires a bit of skill and focus to play, then this is the build for you. If you also love DPS and shattering mobs with huge crits, then this is definitely the build for you. I originally designed this character before Forsaken Masters as a secret side project, and I never actually had a chance to reveal it. Well, I'm glad it actually worked out that way, because this build was massively buffed in patch 1.2. EK was buffed for all EK builds, but this build really leverages the full potential of multiple buffs in the patch, and I think it's definitely the coolest way to play EK now. The Crit Chaos EK Witch was designed to be a softcore DPS machine. I wanted to see how far you could push Ethereal Knives while still having a practical build. I also wanted a really fast paced and super active, fun to play build. Well, this character exceeded my expectations in all of these areas by a huge margin. So yeah, I'm pretty damn proud of this thing. It's also a big middle finger to my heritage of no DPS builds. It feels good to diversify a little. So, since people like numbers, let's do some numbers. Oh yes. The base unbuffed damage for this character is a bit under 20k DPS. With power charges, that goes up to just under 30k DPS. With the Atziri's Promise Flask, which we have almost 100% uptime on, that goes up again to 36k DPS. And then, with all buffs including Val Haste, we break the 50,000 DPS mark. So just under 100% of the time you'll be sitting around 35k-ish DPS as you clear maps, and then about 25 to 50% of the time you'll be a bit above 50k. And then on top of that, this character also uses the powerful damage scaling of Shock Stacks and the buffed Assassin's Mark to even further scale damage to some mathematical heights that I am not clever enough to work out. But this isn't just masturbatory tooltip DPS, no. This character also has good clear speed thanks to the super fast mobility with Lightning Warp and Edge of Screen EK range. We also don't take forever cursing things since Ball Lightning curses half of the screen for us in a single cast. So with the sales pitch out of the way, let's break down how this character actually works. This build achieves its high DPS through the layering of several powerful damage scaling mechanics on top of the already potent Ethereal Knives skill. We scale the base damage with physical damage boosts from the passives and a belt. We then scale this phys damage with the added fire support gem and the hatred aura. We then scale both our physical and elemental damage through added chaos conversions from Ning's Heart and Atziri's Promise uniques. We then scale all of that damage with spell damage and increased cast speed, and finally we package it all together in a nice powerful critical strike wrapping. Delicious. The character keeps itself alive from both enemy attacks and reflect damage, believe it or not, by using a lightning coil, immortal call, a lot of life leech, and chaos damage which cannot actually be reflected back to you. It also freezes and stuns enemies most of the time. That's if they aren't already dead before they can even attack, of course. Our main damage skill is, of course, Ethereal Knives. I have it linked in a 5-link with Spell Echo, increased crit damage, added fire, and projectile speed. I also have Power Charge on crit, which can be switched out for bosses that don't spawn adds, which will make a little bit of sense later on as I explain some other things. You'll also see me using Ball Lightning a lot. This skill is linked to greater multiple projectiles, Curse on Hit, and Assassin's Mark. This has a dual effect. Firstly, when Ball Lightning crits, it does a pretty good job of shocking enemies to debuff them to take 50% more damage. Secondly, the skill curses half the screen with a single cast. I actually started using this setup before 1.2 when I was first testing this build out, but back then Curse on Hit only had a partial chance of applying the curse, and it was kinda crappy-ish. The change to Curse on Hit and to Assassin's Mark was the biggest buffs for this character. Curse on Hit now has a 100% chance to apply the curse, and it also increases its effectiveness. Whoa, what? This gives us more crit chance, more crit damage, and more chances to generate power charges when we kill a cursed enemy. The result is a super damage boosting skill that also generates and sustains power charges for us reliably. This is insane! Absolutely crazy, I couldn't believe it. Seriously, if you have the gem slots, you should be using the new Curse on Hit. It's insane, especially in a crit build. For mobility, I used Lightning Warp with reduced duration and faster casting. With the already decent cast speed of this build, the skill becomes extremely fast for repositioning and clearing maps. It's way faster than actually running and removes the need for a Quicksilver Flask as well. For a big DPS boost against bosses and just generally throughout the map, I use the ever popular Val Haste. Thanks to this build's clear speed, you can use this fairly frequently as well. To squeeze out a little bit more DPS, I one day randomly tested Blood Rage. Thanks to the high chaos resist on this build and high life leech as well, it's actually pretty easy to sustain and gives us an extra 3 frenzy charges permanently, and it's basically for free, doesn't require any extra investment in the passive tree, and it's just basically a bit of free cast speed, so that works out pretty well. For auras, the build runs Hatred for damage scaling, a high level Clarity to support our mana needs, and Purity of Lightning to counter the effects of Lightning Coil. All of these are linked to reduced mana and buffed through aura passives on the skill tree. If you're wondering about the Arctic Armor, I'm just using it with a level 1 20 quality for the move speed boost. With good gear you can level it up a little bit, but it's not a significant factor at all and it can be skipped entirely if you like. In fact, in the optimal setup you wouldn't be running Arctic Armor at all, and you would instead link increased duration to your Vile Haste. Okay, so now let's take a look at the gearing. There are no real required items for this build, but there are a few items that really make it shine, so we'll go through each of those and I'll put them down as almost necessary. Almost necessary. You can make things work without them, but they do help a lot, and you know, I kind of designed this character around using this particular set of items. So let's start off with the basic stuff. We have 4 rares. This is 4 basic rares, I should say. We have the helmet, shield, boots, and gloves. Now, on the helmet, gloves, and boots, you just want life and resistances. If you can get a little bit of extra armor, cool potatoes. Who says that? And then if you can get some move speed on your boots, it's a minor help. You don't really need it because Lightning Warp is very fast even without move speed, but Lightning Warp does scale with move speed, so it'll make you Lightning Warp just slightly, ever so slightly faster. But you can get much cheaper boots if you drop the move speed and just go for good life resist boots, so you can save a bit of cash there. As for the shield, you optimally want a spellcaster shield with some crit chance and spell damage if possible, otherwise just get life and resist on there. As you can see, I have a very crappy shield right here. It's just got some good resist on it, and the reason I'm wearing it was just to be able to sort out my resists and make my resists work to become overcapped for using Lightning Coil. So that was the only reason I'm running this particular piece of junk, but you guys can use a nicer spellcasting shield and get it quite a bit more DPS because of it. As for the weapon, you want that dagger because you get that sweet implicit crit, 80%, oh yes. And then on top of that you want spell damage, crit chance, and crit multiplier. Crit chance and crit multiplier are really great, but spell damage is actually going to be one of the biggest things on here for damage. This dagger is pretty good but has low spell damage. I would be willing to drop like 20 points of crit chance, for example, to be able to get like 5 more points of spell damage, because it would be a damage boost for me. Like, I'd get more damage doing that. So try and prioritize spell damage a little bit. The next item, as you've probably noticed, is Lightning Coil. Now, as I said, some items in this aren't required, but Lightning Coil is a very, very nice defensive boost. For those of you guys who are less familiar with Lightning Coil, I get this question quite often: why do we want to convert something to lightning damage? How is that not going to kill us? And why do we want minus lightning resist? This item seems pretty bad at first, and on first look. But essentially the way Lightning Coil works is it converts something we're very bad at defending, aka physical damage, into something we're very good at defending, aka lightning damage, particularly when you're using something like Purity of Lightning. As you'll see, Purity of Lightning gives me 78% lightning resist. Now, just looking at this tab just here, we see I have 6% physical damage reduction. Now I could boost this a little bit better by wearing a pure armor base chest. Sure, I could get that maybe up to 10% if I had a really nice chest. But compare 78% to 6%, and you kind of get the idea of how Lightning Coil shines. Essentially, our character has no physical mitigation. When I do pop my Granite flask, I do go up to 47%, but even then, 78% is still way better than 47%. Even if you leave out all of the other complex mechanics of armor and stuff like that, Lightning Coil still immediately looks better when you take a look at that sort of thing. So it works very well, and when you do put it on, you're going to notice a real big tankiness increase. Now, you could go for just a normal 6-link or even a Tabula Rasa if you wanted to, but I think it's worth dropping 1 support's worth of damage and instead using the Lightning Coil, because it's going to be a really nice defensive boost, and I think it outweighs any sort of DPS loss, and the character already has ridiculous DPS anyway, so I felt like this was a nice balance. What this does is it saves you from physical reflect damage. I do a pretty good job of sustaining against physical reflect, as long as I'm pretty clever about it. I pop my Atziri's Promise and my Granite Flask as well, and most of the time I'm not going to kill myself. And this also helps against just other physical attackers and things like that would kill you otherwise. So pretty nice item to get. Next up is Doriani's Invitation. This is another item that, although not mandatory, is so good that it's almost mandatory. This helps the character quite a great deal. Now firstly, it has up to 30% I think physical damage scaling. Now that scales Ethereal Knives by quite a good margin, so that's very nice to get. It's higher than what you can get on a Rustic Sash, and you get a bit of extra bonus strength, you know, although you don't have a life roll and it does have good resist, so overall it's a pretty decent belt, gives you a bit of extra damage. What the real key point is, 1% of physical damage leached as life. Now this works with Ethereal Knives, whereas most life leech does not work with Ethereal Knives, because pretty much all other forms of life leech on gear are like physical life leech. They're physical attacks. It's physical attack life leech, and Ethereal Knives is a spell, so it doesn't work. So this is one of the few items that actually does work with Ethereal Knives, and because Ethereal Knives hits very hard by default, and because we're playing a crit build, gives us a huge amount of extra leech. So you can see my physical damage just there is 1100 to 1700. Huge amounts, and then when I get crit, you know, that top end, it's going to be big bursts of leech. So 1% actually makes a great deal of difference, despite not really sounding that powerful. And it means basically you don't have to run a life leech support gem. Awesome stuff. And then I probably shouldn't underestimate the potency of the final effect, although it doesn't come into play too much because we're using hatred and critting and freezing things a lot of the time. It's still, for the things that we don't freeze, it actually does pretty good. Now we have pretty much permanent flask uptime on this character. This character is always using some form of flask, be it Granite or Atziri's Promise. So we get 20% extra reduced enemy stun threshold. So we stun enemies with EK. EK hits hard. It stuns pretty well. This makes it stun even better. So it's a nice little bit of sprinkling icing on top. It's not too bad. Now the next thing are those rare jewelries. I have two pieces of rare jewelry. We have a ring and an amulet. You want to get life and resist on this, whatever you kind of need. Jewelry is always a bit of a wild card slot. You can pick up a bit of extra stuff in just there. Getting a little bit of mana on one of these is going to help a great deal with getting things supported. At my current level, this 63 mana is not crucial, but it certainly helps quite a bit. If I do take it off, I do have some problems, so it's a good idea to get about 50 plus mana on one of these items if possible. You can get it on a few other items, like your weapon or your shield, for example, but just that one item there, like, you know, getting a nice mana roll on one of those is pretty easy to do, and will help you a good margin. Otherwise, you want to try and get some like spell damage, crit chance, crit multiplier. This is one. Here's a pretty nice crit amulet. Bit of crit chance, bit of crit multi. Crit chance 30% is like about 1.5 passives worth of crit chance, whereas the crit multiplier is much better. It's almost 3 or 1 notable. So, and crit multiplier is much harder to get, so that's a huge damage boost right there. I actually corrupted this amulet and got 1% of cold damage leached as life, which is pretty good. That's pretty good because we use hatred, and you'll see my cold damage is 570 to 860, and that's, you know, that's without a crit. That's like average damage worked out there. So that's actually pretty good. 1% of that leech back is again really nice. So that's a pretty good corruption if you can get something like that. It's gonna be just gravy. Now the final item, as you've probably seen here, the shiny Ming's Heart, one of my favorite items in the game, is not very popular nowadays because of the change to life, meaning that the reduced life on this item is a little bit more hurtful than it used to be. Now this is reduced, this is not less, so this is worth about 3 passives worth of good life or 4 passives worth of average life. So from the tree, you know, 4 passives worth. So it's a bit of a penalty, but the positives of Ming's Heart will outweigh it, and especially in this build. In most builds it's still going to outweigh it, and in this build I think it definitely does. So the first thing is we get a lot of chaos resistance. Chaos resistance is usually something you only start building for once you have very good GG gear anyway, and then you're starting to get chaos resist for that 1 in 100 times where chaos damage is going to kill you. But getting all that chaos resist on this one item is fantastic. As you can see, my chaos resist just standing still is 23%, and it actually goes up even further when I use the Atziri's Promise, which gives us another 35%, and even more because of our flask effect nodes. But the main thing, in addition to the chaos resist, which does help us support Blood Rage and give us a nice defensive boost and helps counter our low life a little bit, is that gain 20% of physical damage as extra chaos. This works a lot like Added Fire. It puts it on top, so if we have 100 points of fizz damage, this gives us 20 points of chaos damage on top for 120 total damage. Now the really nice thing about chaos damage in a crit build is that chaos damage cannot be reflected back to you. There is physical and elemental reflect in the game, and chaos is neither of those things, so it can't actually be reflected. So we get a way to scale and get huge amounts of extra damage without any increasing risk in reflect. And then this item combos very nicely with Atziri's Promise. the first mod on Atziri's Promise you'll see there is 10% of chaos damage leached as life during flask effect. So we straight up get 10% of that 20% chaos damage as life leech, and that's always on our character, so whenever we use Atziri Promise we're getting extra life leech again. Awesome stuff, awesome stuff. I just love that synergy. And then, let's talk about the rest of Atziri's Promise, which is an amazing flask in a lot of builds, but even better in this one because we really use all three of these mods to their full potential. We have gains 25% of physical, that's the max roll for that one, 14% on the Ellie's 1 point off max, so you want to try and get as max as possible on this item. 25% of physical damage is as extra chaos, again another 25% chucked on top there, so you'll see our chaos damage goes up from 229 to 343, all the way up to 782 to 1100 or 1200 there. So that's a pretty huge boost right there. And Ethereal Knives being physical damage works really well with that. And then, because we're using added fire and the Hatred aura, which gives us 35% as extra cold, this gives us 38% as extra fire, we also get that elemental scaling as well. So this one here gives 15% of elemental damage as extra chaos. So we double dip there, we get both the physical, and then we convert to element, and then we convert that element to chaos, giving us so much damage, just a looping sexiness of extra added chaos damage. And then we leech from all of that chaos damage. Oh, it's so good. So we get 10% of, if I actually use the right flask, 758 to 12, almost 1200 chaos damage just there, so a huge amount of extra leech, fantastic flask. And then the next one is the Granite flask. You really want a Surgeons of Iron Skin if possible, and our flask effect nodes scale this as well, so really nice stuff. And the Surgeons means that because of the high crit rate of this build with power charges up, you're pretty much always critting, pretty much always going to have Granite Flask up, so you can permanently chain Granite Flask and Atziri's Promise by bouncing between the two of these, and by using the Surgeons mod on this just here. The other two flasks you'll want are a Dispels Shocked. I like Instant Heal and Dispels Shocked. That's to help counter the occasional shock you'll take from Lightning Coil, and just because shocks are dangerous anyway. And then a Staunching, because Ball Lightning hits very quickly and hits a lot, as does very fast cast speed EK. So Corrupting Blood is a bit of danger, so having a Staunching on a panic button like this one here, it's on my big spacebar, will help with that. So you need a Removes Bleed and a Dispels Shocked. And then your 2 Atziri Flasks and your Granite Flask, and you're good to go. Okay, so let's go through the passive skill tree in a bit of detail. Now, there is a little bit of min-maxing and a few key points of this to do with auras and mana regen especially. So, although there are a lot of ways you can go about building Ethereal Knives character, if you do want to rebuild this a different way and you prefer a different routing, make sure you hit, do an analysis of this tree, put it in PoE Builder and get those stats and try and replicate those, because there's a few things you need to do to get this working. But otherwise, let's get into it. So, you do want to start Witch over Shadow. Shadow is obviously great for Ethereal Knives, and for a lot of Ethereal Knives build is going to be the best start. But Witch has one key difference. She gets for 1 point 40% mana regen. As I said, we had to min-max that mana and mana regen quite a bit there. If you had better gear, you could probably start Shadow, but for the most part, you're going to have an easier time as Witch. So, fantastic start there. She has that advantage, whereas Shadow doesn't have any advantage to start there. And as the Witch, we can just dunk in and get the fizz damage anyway, so no real loss there starting as Witch. Now we come up through the spell damage. I grabbed these two 4% cast speeds here because it allows us to get 8% for 2 points, instead of going into something like Nimbleness where you have to spend 3 points to get that same level of efficiency per point. So I like just ducking in and grabbing those, and you can always fill that out later if you want to. But this is where I'm currently at, so we head up through the spell damage. I mentioned in the gearing section, spell damage makes a big difference once you're scaling a lot of crit, so it feels like every point of spell damage gives a huge amount of damage boost, so we do go through that. We come up through the critical strike chance. This is not really in order of leveling. Since I redesigned this character after 1.2 when I'd already leveled it, I don't really have a leveling guide for you guys, so you kind of have to figure that out for yourselves. But the spell crit cluster here is fantastic, so we do go up into there. We get the life cluster here and deep thoughts, which is again key to getting that mana situation sorted. Now we grab this power charge and the power charge over in Shadow for a total of 2+ from the tree, and you'll see the bandits on screen here as well, hopefully, and obviously we get the extra power charge from the bandits. We also get spell damage per power charge, which is again great damage scaling. Now the flask effect nodes, oh, I love the flask effect nodes, they are so good. So what this does is it gives increased effective flasks, We get 12, 8, and 8, and then we even get some flask effect duration thrown in there as well. Now what this does is this scales the damage scaling of Atziri's Promise and the leech. So again, we triple dip on top of that Atziri's Promise there, getting like all 3 of those effects, and then scaled up by this. So we actually get a lot more than what this would actually lead us to believe. And on the same token, we also get a lot more extra armor from the Granite Flask than what we should be getting as well, because this scales both the base armor from the Granite Flask and the armor scaling, the 82% armor scaling there, or if you have closer to 100, it's even better. It also scales, you know, your effects from your healing flasks as well, so that's not too bad. But mostly it's all about the Atziri's Promise and the Granite Flask, and this cluster is fantastic. It's basically DPS, healing, and defense all rolled into 3 points of pure sexiness. So next up, we route through Practical Application, which gives us some strength and dexterity, which is handy. And then it also gives stun interruption, so basically you can't be interrupted while you're casting, which is pretty much always, so that helps quite a lot when we don't have a huge life pool. You know, those big hits, you don't want to be stunned, you want to be killing things, and getting stunned is going to stop you from killing things, so it's not too bad. It's not too bad a way to route. The alternative would pretty much be to go through Intelligence or something else awkward anyway, so it ends up being a decent way to route. We go through Deep Wisdom and up into the Life and Mana cluster just here. This is obviously decent life, but also the mana helps. And then I route down through this way, picking up a bit of extra dexterity, which certainly helps out. Come up this way, grabbing Physique for a bit more strength. If you need to, you can grab Alacrity there. And then we come up through, we'll go this way first. We come up through this way into the Life and Energy Shield. Pop up here, grab the entire crit cluster, or you can leave the spell crit multiplier for later and pick that up at a later date. This is something you want to pick up at higher level because it's only 10% per point. It's just squishing a little bit of extra damage out of the build. Now we do have to come across here and get the Influence cluster. Fantastic aura cluster, and it's key to making the aura setup work and to giving us enough mana with clarity as well. So Influence is very important. We then come back down through here, and obviously, as I said, grabbing the power charge, go down through cold-hearted calculation, spell damage, and mana regen. Oh yes, both things we want. We go through the awesome crit nodes, and then into Ethereal Knives Heaven. Oh, quickness, which is physical damage and move speed. Awesome. Sniper, which is projectile damage and projectile speed, which works both, it positively impacts our ball lightning by making it reach further off the screen so you curse more things, and our ethereal knives by giving us more range on that, so that's so good. Then we come through coordination, which gives us some cast speed and dexterity. We can pop up and grab blood siphon and trickery. Now the life gain on kill's not a big deal, it's mostly just about the life, and you get an extra point for trickery, which is 20%, with a bit of LE scaling thrown on top as a sprinkling, so not too bad. And then through the excellent fizz damage nodes just here. So from there we pop down. We needed to grab the Charisma cluster to make everything work, so it's kind of worth the travel down here to grab that. And since you're already at Charisma, we do pop down and grab Ballistic Mastery, which is fantastic. I think most EK builds end up getting Ballistic Mastery, and for good reason. It's just a great node for it. Extra projectile speed, 20%, 1/5, shoot 1/5 further, essentially. And then Heart of Oak is amazing now, so we get that. The extra life regen helps a little bit. Once you're stacking all that Chaos Resist, it means you can sustain Blood Rage pretty easily. Now, the other way we go down is through here, grabbing Mending for a bit of extra life, just to give us just enough life. We can pop and grab this one aura effect node just here. We don't need the reduced mana reservation, but maybe at lower levels of auras you could grab it if you needed it to start running all your auras sooner and then respec out of it later. But the aura effect is fantastic. Harrier is cast speed, move speed, awesome stuff. Hired Killer is a bit of extra life, and then we get True Strike, which is a very nice crit cluster. Now, I know some people will ask, why didn't we route this way and grab the fizz damage? It's just too many points. There was better things to spend points on. It ended up being more efficient routing this way. So we essentially spent 2 points there, picked up strength, which is it's 5 extra life, instead of going through useless dexterity and not being able to afford those anyway. But you could, I guess, scoot over there and get that if you wanted to, and break that chain just there if you wanted to, if you were a high level character in the 90s or something. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how this passive skill tree turned out. If you have any questions about it, obviously, leave them down in the comments below, or anything about this build for that matter. So I hope you guys enjoyed this build guide, and that you have a blast playing this character. If you made it to the end, then you probably enjoyed it at least a decent amount. And if so, please consider maybe sharing this video with a friend. It's one of the best things you guys can do to help my channel grow along. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.